I know that y'all aren't used to us meeting in this illustrious room over here under the Gold Dome, but that's the reason you saw all the security down there on a high level of security. When this committee meets, ain't no telling what might happen, isn't it, Colonel?
I better move.
I want to welcome everybody here this morning on the
Yeah.
eve of the 28th crossover day. We've got 5 bills in front of us today to be heard. There's a couple of resolutions that's going around. All the members of the committee probably would like to sign them. One of them is to recognize March the 6th as Law Enforcement Appreciation Day here at the Capitol. The other one is recognizing the Chiefs, Georgia Chiefs Day. And if y'all would feel free to, I'd be grateful if y'all would sign on as a committee. Let's see what we have. I see we have several members in attendance with bills today. Judge Caldwell, do you have a bill, or are you just here to you're just here to do us honor? Oh. Coming from the reapportionment chairman, who will be pretty soon the most important person in the House, you're always welcome to come, Judge, and thank you for your attendance today. Chairman Epps, would you like to present your bill first today? All right, House Bill 472. See which one of these is on. Is that one on?
Yeah. Well.
Yep. Try it again. Try one of the other mics. All right.
I think we have it now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we want to express our appreciation to Chairman Lunsford and your subcommittee yesterday for giving us the opportunity to present this bill. We're working off of LC 391560, House Bill 472. And this bill will basically or simply amend state code as far as related to following too closely by adding a subsection to allow vehicles to follow closely with the speed of the non-leading vehicle being automatically coordinated. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I want to ask Mr. Frank Morris if he will discuss or present the finer details and the technicalities of this so we can give this piece of legislation its proper vetting.
That'd be just fine. Frank, won't you come on up?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seems to be a very simple bill, only just gives an exemption for drafting, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This bill allows 2 trucks and 2 drivers to drive closely together on the highway in order that they might save fuel. And by saving fuel, in order to get to that point, the companies that invest in this technology, they have to invest in a lot of safety technology beforehand. And this safety technology is, it's like adaptive cruise control, and this is not autonomous driverless vehicles. This is 2 drivers and 2 trucks. And the trucks travel in close proximity using technology like adaptive cruise control, automatic braking, vehicle-to-vehicle communication, radar, and it saves on fuel, and it's possible because of the safety technology. And this safety technology, when it's, you can use this safety technology without ever using truck platooning. So the benefits of desiring to enter into truck platooning to save fuel, what comes first is all the safety technology and all the benefits of safety technology that allow trucks to see out hundreds of feet well in advance and come to automatic stops if necessary. And UPS is invested in this technology. We have this technology on our trucks already, and we'd like the authority to be able to do this in Georgia and in some other southeastern states.
Colonel, is this another thumbs up from the preeminent law enforcement group on the highways today? Great technology. Good deal. Mr. Crowell, would you like to address this issue, since you have all the rest of them?
I like it. Quite honestly, sir, this is some exciting safety technology, Mr. Chairman. It will not only save fuel, it will move our highways to be even safer in everything they do, and look forward to having Georgia take a leadership position in this.
Very good. All right, questions?
Well, I'm all for this, and I believe it's forward-looking, forward-thinking, but, you know, in the code that's added in here, it doesn't specify that the vehicles have to be equipped as such. You know, we talked about it outside, and I have that system in a new car that I have, and it worked very effectively, much more effectively than my 70-year-old body does. But what if we run into people who are doing this who aren't so equipped?
Well, I don't believe you could do it if you're not equipped, because you can't travel in that close proximity. The adaptive cruise control that you have probably wouldn't allow you to travel that closely, and you're certainly not going to want to travel that closely.
No, mine prohibits me from
Yeah,
getting too
yes,
close.
Yes.
All right. Other questions? Ms. Frazier?
How can I, just because I see two trucks out there, I see trucks out on I-20 all the time, hundreds of them. So how do I know, can I detect whether these trucks are paired together like this? Can you see it? Or how can I know it?
The trucks can be outfitted with signage that says these trucks are that are cruise control or platooning capable. And also, the technology would allow a signal to be sent so that the highway safety would also be able to know that the trucks are in a platooning mode.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Mm-mm.
Let's see. Mr. Lunston, or
It's me.
Mr. Jaspers, Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you. I just so this is for 2 trucks only.
Yes.
So we wouldn't have convoys of 6, 8, 10,
No, this is not what it's intended for.
just for 2.
Right.
I guess I'm with Chairman Hitchens over here. How will law enforcement know? I guess that you said the word may. They may have a beacon or whatever it is. So I don't know that law enforcement can.
Well, we would
Identify
work.
that.
We would work with law enforcement. The companies that are advancing this technology are going to partner with a specific number of companies when they initiate this type of technology, and we would share that information because we would want highway safety to obviously know that UPS is involved in this technology or Yellow Freight is involved in this technology, and so that they're familiar with it. So it's not that you're going to rapidly see many companies adopting this technology at first.
And lastly, Mr. Chairman, do y'all still have a NASCAR car where y'all could put it on your cars, run around the racetracks with it?
We've not been sponsoring NASCAR for many years now,
My goodness, okay.
Go.
and I hope that doesn't influence the committee, Mr. Jasper.
You know, some of it.
Well, you know, since NASCAR has reached the point of political correctness like so many other sports activities, who cares? Mr. Gravely.
It was me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor, Chairman Taylor.
Just a quick question here. I do think it's great technology and will be very good for us. But what is the definition of too closely? Is this what's already in there? I mean, is there a definition of too closely? And how far apart are we talking about these vehicles being?
There is no definition, I believe, in the code that says X amount of feet. It was just safe and prudent. So this technology allows trucks to travel as closely as 40 feet.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Would this be Mr. Petrie or Mr.
Yeah,
Green?
that's me.
Mr. Petrie.
Sir, trucks of different organizations, but do you foresee these different companies, different organizations being able to pair up like this?
Yes,
With
sir.
technology? So
They would be allowed to
wouldn't
pair
be-
up,
Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Colonel Hitchens.
Already got mine.
All right. Any other questions from any of the committee members? Everybody feel warm and gentle about this issue? If not, I believe this bill was reported back from Subcommittee A with a due pass recommendation. And I'm almost shocked because it is in its original form as introduced. There's no substitute. Something's wrong about this idea that something slips through this committee with no substitute. But, all right, what's the will of the committee? Sound like a choir. We have a motion and we have a second. Any further questions from any of the committee members? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Frank.
committee.
And thank you, Chairman Epps. Let's see. Is Representative Hughley here today? Oh, there she is. Carolyn, if you, Representative Hughley, would you step to the mic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, it's my pleasure to bring House Bill 474. If this bill had a title, I would call it the Georgia Safe Stop Act. And basically what we're trying to do is to make sure that our police officers and our motoring public are safe when we are involved in traffic stops. So we know that we have excellent police officers and they are trained in traffic stops, but our drivers and our passengers are not necessarily so trained. So what we'd like to do is try and address this issue by having the Department of Driver Services, when it publishes a new driver's manual, to include a section in there to tell us what the appropriate procedures are for drivers and passengers when we are stopped for traffic citations. And then we also ask that the Governor's Office of Highway Safety publicize in any way that they choose this type of information, so that we want our police officers to go home safely, and we don't want inexperienced drivers to make mistakes that will cause them harm. And so that's essentially the bill, and I'll be happy to yield for any questions.
All right, questions from the committee? Mr. Jaspers.
Actually,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Mr. Lunston.
Okay. We've had conversations, and I am very supportive of this legislation. I've had those questions asked of me, having been in law enforcement for almost 30 years. I've had many people come to me to ask about the proper procedure for doing this. So I think putting something like this in written form so the motoring public, and particularly our young people, know how to respond should they be stopped makes a lot of sense. So I'm very supportive of this, and thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you.
Very good. If I might ask, in the subcommittee, did DDS testify about any cost or anything? I know it says future publications, but
Right.
should not be a cost to add to the driver's manual.
Right.
Something in this category. All right. Any questions? This be you, Matt?
That'll be me.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Representative Hughley for bringing this bill to, and at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
It might be in just a minute. Do we have any other questions from any of the committee members? This would be the proper time.
I'll make a motion to do pass, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any further questions, comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Representative, thank you for this good piece of, something that doesn't cost anything, but it hopefully send a message out there to the drivers out there today.
Thank you. Thank you, members
They
of the
can
committee.
read it when they're getting ready to take their license, because it's obviously something that mom and daddy didn't teach a lot of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. House Bill 487, Representative Bonner. Welcome. Your first time in front of this committee?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Presenting House Bill 487, working off of LC 440313. This is as presented to the subcommittee. 487 amends the Disaster Volunteer Relief Act, which currently allows for members of the Red Cross that are state employees up to 15 days of paid leave in order to participate in disaster relief in the state of Georgia or any state we've got a emergency compact with. This adds the Civil Air Patrol to that list any state employee that's also a member of the Civil Air Patrol would receive that same amount of leave in order to participate in disaster relief. It is at the discretion of that particular department. It has to be a named and numbered mission, and it has to be for, again, only 15 days within a 12-month period.
Very good. Questions? Questions from the committee? Mac?
It was on from the last time.
All right, any questions? You know, I would guess I need, anybody got a thermometer? This is the third bill up here that there's been no changes made in it. There's any substitute. So we're
It was a very rigorous subcommittee, Mr.
Very
Chairman.
good. Chairman Jaspers.
This is really a question for the chairman. And it may be something you might want to add or do some different bill, but the Georgia Defense Force, civilian members, would it be not appropriate for them to be added to something like this, or because they're the same sort of? I'm not a member of it. I just know of it. Chairman Hitchens shaking his head up and down, must know about it, but just as a discussion point, I was just thinking of them and something like this.
And I didn't think of them, but I worked extensively with them in my time when I was the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And they do fall into the same category, and many of them, but I think in some cases it would be duplicative because they're going to be called up anyway for those types of things. Although they're not used extensively, they first use public safety people, and then they go to the National Guard, which is pretty expensive, to be very honest, and then to the Defense Forces.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from any of the members? My goodness. All right, what's the will of the committee? We have a motion, we have a second. Any further questions, comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the ayes have this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We got two bills left at the discretion of the chair. I have a bill in front of you. It's House Bill 458. I'm gonna get it out of the way before we get to the last bill because there may be more discussion on the next bill. If any of you who were on the committee last year recognize this bill, well, you should. It's the same bill that passed the House, passed the Senate committee, and got held up in the Rules Committee last year. This is an optional bill for local governments, and it's a public safety measure that would allow local governments to opt in if they wish to use speed zone cameras in school zones. For those who were on the committee last year, you may remember it was very tightly drawn. This is optional to the local governments. These zone cameras are 1,000 feet from the edge of the property. It's only used for K-12 schools during school hours, and during school hours means an hour before and an hour after. None of this stuff that we see with that goes on, that they run them 24 hours, 7 days a week. If a school's not in, then they're not in, and they take them out. The law enforcement officers have to review them, and remember, these aren't moving violations. These are civil violations, just like school buses, just like toll lane cameras and such like this. There's a fine, could be as high as $125, and any admin fees are capped at $25. They have to have signs that are 24 by 30, and the signs have to be at least 500 feet out from the point of these school zone cameras to put them on notice. Quite frankly, I look at it as, maybe might save some chilling. Call it the save the Demetrius bill, probably, in some of these school zones. If it can slow folks down, I think the signage is probably going to be the most important thing. That big of a sign, a 24 by 30 sign, if you've got it posted, it might actually slow some of these folks down going through a school zone. Citation, of course, just like last year, it has to be dated, it has to be verified, it goes in front of a law enforcement officer, and so they actually scrutiny. There's no civilians that are scrutinizing these things. The owner has a due process clause. If it wasn't that driver, then they can They can file for a hearing on it and show that it wasn't them, tell them who was driving their car. So it was pretty well scrutinized and stripped down and went over pretty well last year. At this point, I've explained the bill, and I'll certainly open it to questions. Mr. Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the question I have, and thank you for the bill, the question I have is in regards to holidays and school breaks, because sometimes you have these automatic lights that come on and all these things that are even running during the time that school is actually not in. So would this incorporate not being fined or receiving citations for those particular days, holidays, and school?
The bill is very clear. The bill is very clear. It says an hour before and an hour after the school is in or out. And that's the comment I made earlier, where we see a lot of times flashing lights that are going 24 hours because somebody's too darn lazy to tend to their lights. If somebody gets cited under this, I would certainly hope they've got enough sense to appeal under the word of the law.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will these citations be sent through the mail?
These citations will be sent through the mail, and if not responded, then it goes through certified mail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to clarify what you said about how they would determine whether or not it was during the service, the school hours, because you said they would all be manually checked afterwards. So if whoever's checking it has a calendar as to when the times occur, and they would be certain that citations wouldn't be issued unless it was during the time frames identified.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, I've dealt with this many times. There were efforts through the years to try and do this along our interstate highways and put them out there, and our agency always was opposed to that, as was our previous governor. And there's an ability right now, I understand, for a DOT through their traffic management system to be able to identify people who are speeding at all points along the interstate highways. But, everybody's pushed back because of the public perception of how that would be done. But I think this is the exception. I think when you have little children running around the school, and you never know when one's going to have a ball go out in the road and they're going to chase after it, because I see it in areas. I've got one in my hometown where you come across a viaduct and you're right there at the school, and people come over that thing all the time too fast. And this is a proper safety valve, I think, for a special case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're absolutely right. I know that there seems to be a prevailing feeling among a lot of people and a lot of the legislators, including myself. I think we're all guilty of some infraction of the law. Not that I'm guilty of speeding at times, coming up and down the road, but I just want, most people have a problem about the cameras. But in this particular case, this is drawn so tightly, and I'm like yourself, Colonel. I look at school zones in a different eye. These are where you have children that are crossing the streets and being let out. And at the end of the day, I think that the biggest tool that is an optional to the local police departments and law enforcement agencies. If they want to opt into this, then they can do it, and they know what the rules of the game are if they want to use them. And it's just a tool. Probably the most important thing is having that sign up warning people, a clearly visible sign that you are entering a school zone. So slow it down. Any questions? My goodness. And here's another bill that hasn't been amended. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And this chairman thanks you for your diligence on that. Last but not least. Now, what are we going to name that bill? We're going to be Save the Chillin'. All right. All right. We have another bill. We have one last bill. May or may not have discussion on this, but it's House Bill 452. Committee Member Petrie has got a bill and a proposition in front of us, and I think it was pretty well vetted yesterday. All right. All right, Mr. Petrie.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. And yes, it was pretty well vetted yesterday. And to emphasize, first of all, we are looking now at LC 411133S. Having made some changes, there were some concerns by some organizations that testified, and by Representative Glanton, my good friend, that I thought were well made, and so we removed some language to make this very clear. So the goal of this bill is very simple. Right now, there is a federal program called LENS, the Law Enforcement Notification System. Federal government provides data to every state in the union on criminal aliens who have been released from federal custody and who are returning to those states. Much of the time, that is because those individuals cannot be deported to their country of origin because their country of origin has refused to take them back. And so apparently the federal government believes it's important enough in the interest of public safety to provide that information to GBI, and I see that GBI is represented here today. However, currently, because we have no policy in Georgia, right now that information is just sitting at GBI. It's not going anywhere. So what we need is a policy in Georgia to allow us to disseminate, and this bill will require that that information goes immediately pretty much to all of your sheriffs in this state and is made public and transparent on the GBI website. And so this is real simple, and if you look at, as Representative Glanton and I did yesterday and went over some of this data, I want to make this very clear. These are only violent criminal aliens. So these are not traffic tickets. These are not parking tickets. There's a specific list in the LENS policy, and I'm looking at it right now. You're talking homicide, kidnapping, rape, sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault. These are the crimes that are alerted by the feds to the state through GBI. We created a fusion center here. My understanding was to gather data on public safety and disseminate it to the people. And that is simply what this bill is doing. This is about public safety first and foremost, but make no mistake, this is also about transparency. The people have a right to know how many criminal aliens are being returned back into their community because we have been unable to return them to their home countries. And that's very simple, Mr. Chairman, what this bill does. And again, we removed some language. There were some concerns in the earlier version about language that spoke to individuals that had been arrested, booked, detained, incarcerated, or convicted. And we wanted to make it very clear that we wanted to make sure, and I've worked closely with Representative Glanton, we wanted to make sure we were talking about people who had been convicted and served their time and were coming back. And so basically what we did was change the language, and as you'll see now in the substitute, it basically just says those names that are on the list that come to GBI through LENS. And so that'll make it very clear. It doesn't specify any of that earlier language, and our hope was that everybody in Georgia, everybody who's interested in public safety could support this language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Mr. Glanton.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you, Representative Petrie. And I just wanted to say publicly, thank you so much for your patience, for your willingness to work with us, for your willingness to change the language and in some cases delete language that was considered to be extremely inflammatory and sensitive. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much because you didn't have to.
No, well, thank you, sir. It was we wanted to make it better. Thank you for helping us do that.
So thank you, Mr. Chair.
You know, you were that nice to me about my driver's license bill, but somehow you didn't help me get the right verbiage on that. So
That's the old, all that's been removed.
scratched my head on this
Yeah, there's a
one.
new sub. Yeah, that's all that is.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Representative Petrie, for bringing this bill. Just
Yes,
one
sir.
question.
Yes.
How do you access or how do you get into this system to find those names?
Well, right now we can't, and that's part of the problem, Representative. This information is shared right now by the feds to GBI, and GBI is, I need to make it very clear, sharing that information for the purposes of law enforcement.
Okay.
So we do that, but in their policy, what they state is that if a state wants to share that information more broadly, that is their right as long as they have a state policy that allows them to do so. So what we're doing here is making sure that, one, they then share it with our law enforcement agencies, and two, that we have a policy that allows Georgia to share it more broadly.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good question.
Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate your bill. Just got a question. In the going from your original to the sub,
Yes.
have you, I guess on line 14, we would just say the names of people or persons. I mean, is it just going to have Rick Jaspers? Is that how the data is put out to these folks and the Georgia Sheriff's Association, or is it a
No, sir.
detailed? I mean,
No, sir. And Chairman, I can, we have GBI here that Mike can speak more beneficially to the issue, to your question, but here's what I would say. It's certainly more than, just like on our own citizens, when you go to our Department of Corrections websites and jail websites, and we've got registries of our own citizens on sexual predators, et cetera. And so typically that information would include the names and all of the crimes that have been committed. I'm looking over at our friends from GBI. But so I think there'd be a great deal of data there that would emphasize the threat or the risk of this individual in the community.
well, I guess I'm also asking, if I can, ma'am, that, so when this, we're not, by defining so closely the names of persons, we're not limiting the data that you can put on the website. That's my question. Certainly, yes, ma'am. Okay.
And
I
if
just
I could
wanted to
just-
make sure that
That's a
people
good
are getting
question.
something that they can use.
No, and a good question. I think that if as that sentence reads on, it again refers to that information released by LENS. So essentially, what this bill is saying is that which is provided by LENS will be forwarded on. And so I think that all of that data is going to, it'll certainly be more than the name. What we tried to do was just take all the language about whether people have been arrested and booked and all that, and just make it simple that that which is provided by LENS is then forwarded to our law enforcement and to the people of Georgia via the website at GBI.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Frazier.
Yes, thank you, Representative Petrie, for bringing this legislation. Now, when, by state policy, like you just mentioned, we can, I can go online and see sex offenders that are in my district.
Yes, ma'am.
Even 2 or 3 streets away from me, you can actually see that.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
will this, piece of legislation have a picture of that person?
I don't know that. Representative, that's a good question. I can't answer that. I think that I don't know to what degree, again, because this information is not available to us now, I haven't been privy to it, nor has anyone else in this state. And so I don't know that I can answer that. GBI would be the only folks that can answer that at this point.
Thank you.
Colonel Hitchens.
And I was just going to continue on in that same vein. I was the second signer on this bill, but I didn't attend the subcommittee meeting and don't realize what's occurred. But certainly one important facet of it is an address. On the sexual offender registry, you can look and see who's in close proximity to you or your kids or your grandchildren. And but I know that's onerous for whoever has to keep up with that, because many of these people are transients, and I don't know whether that's included, or you're going to leave that up to the GBI, or that's probably going to be a costly endeavor, but it certainly would be one that would be, because many of these names are going to be the same, and I worked in law enforcement for 43
Yes, sir.
years with Department of Public Safety, and I can tell you, when you stop somebody along the road whose name is Bill Smith, you're going to get 20 hits on NCIC.
Sure.
And you about have to fingerprint him before you can identify whether or not this is the Bill Smith that's You know, if you have a name like Bill Hitchens, I think there are about 6 of us in the country. You can you can pretty readily identify whether it's him or not with or without a picture. But
Right.
so and really that's not a question, because it's just a statement of what would be the best policy. Although, is it sufficient enough to enable the cost?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And thank you for signing the bill.
Very good. Any other questions from any of the committee members? I've got just a couple of questions. One,
Yes, sir.
no, who is
I think
that?
Representative Holcomb has a question as well, Chairman.
Stop.
Oh, witness two. Witness at the top.
Witness, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my concern echoes what was just stated in terms of the multiple names, because certainly we understand highlighting those who are in the criminal justice system and raising that awareness, but we wouldn't want it to be a problem for those who are innocent and may have duplicative names.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how you solve that without getting a lot of information and putting that out there, which of course is time intensive and expensive. And how, where in the bill does it say that it's limited to just the 7 deadly sins or the crimes that you mentioned?
It doesn't in the bill, Representative. Actually, if you look at the policy for the LENS, the bill refers to the LENS program.
Yes.
That's the acronym LENS, and that program, if you look at the data that describes the program, it lists specifically the crimes. And I have a copy of that if you'd like to see it.
Okay.
My friend, and it's right here. But they're violent crimes. We, again, had our interest is public safety, and so we wanted to, that's the intention of this program, and that information is being shared, and it's just not being utilized, and it seems like such a waste, and this will allow us to fully utilize it in Georgia.
Why are these people being released to begin with? If these are violent crimes, do you have any understanding as to why that is even happening?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to answer that. I have, one of the things that got me interested in this topic was the data nationally. So to answer that, we've all heard about the Kate Steinle story. We've all heard about Kate Steinle. There was a recent story of a lady named Casey Chadwick, who was murdered by an individual who had been tried to be deported 3 times back to his home country of Haiti. He served his time for a violent crime. They couldn't deport him, so he was returned back to the community, and he almost immediately killed a young woman by the name of Casey Chadwick in Connecticut. This happens more than you'd believe. Actually, the data, if you're interested, just 2011 data. In 2011, among criminal aliens released from immigration detention, there have been 10,731 convictions for assault, 890 for sexual assault, including rape, 473 for homicide, like the Casey Chadwick story, and 375 for kidnapping. So here's what's happening. Because our federal government has failed to adequately enforce our nation's immigration laws, and because we don't use the leverage that we should to require countries of origin to take their citizens back, we basically just return them back to the general population of our throughout our communities in our country, and right here in Atlanta, and right in my community of Savannah. And so those individuals oftentimes reoffend. And so I think that's a fantastic question. I guess the answer is because of the failure of the federal government to do its job, local law enforcement has no other option, and in this case, the federal government itself thinks they have no option, and so they are, because this only relates to those coming out of federal prisons today, and they return them right back to the community. So it's an outrage, quite frankly, but it is what it is, and I think this is just one little arrow in the quiver of trying to deal with that as a public safety issue. And again, as an issue of letting the public know what is going on. Very few people know the data I just read to you. And by the way, that information came from the AJC. So you know, most people don't understand the degree to which this happens. And they
And
do
I-
not because they're not getting the information.
Thank you. And I understand those that have been released, but the bill says on line 24, arrested as well, arrested and booked. And so that's
I'm sorry, sir. No, there's a sub.
okay.
I'm sorry. That's right. I had explained that, I think, before you came in.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we
So
deleted
this is
all
just
of that
released.
language.
Just
sir.
released.
Deleted all of that because of your concerns. I wanted to, and Representative Glanton was extremely helpful to me in making sure that we perfected this to make it where it was something that everybody who has any interest in public safety in this state could support. Every citizen of this state, regardless of who they are, should support this bill. And so we took all that language out and made clear that it was only those individuals that the feds thought a threat enough to send to us in Lens.
So to make sure that I completely understand, and I think that I do, but if you'll indulge me, these are only those who have been convicted, have served time, and then are released to the community. So really akin to this model of the sexual offender registry, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see, would this be Mr. Bradley?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
We have another country heard from down there.
Thank you. Thank you. God's country, matter of fact. I want to say thank you to the author for bringing the bill. To continue on what Mr. Representative Holcomb is saying, I think in order, and maybe this is for the GBI, I think there was a question on, at this point, what legally or what by law you're going to be able to, the information you're going to be able to present. I like the idea of the register. I think the more information, the better. It's the more information, the more effective this particular policy is going to be. If there's a with the registry, it's a photo, an address, the type of offense, correct? I mean, any type of previous history would be included. I think the more information, the better. I don't really know if the bill would be effective if it was just a name and an offense. So I would like. I hope that it would be able to be as much information as possible that the public would be able to access on these particular individuals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nellie, would you like to be?
Or if that,
I'd appreciate it if Nellie would speak to that.
Let her come up to the podium.
We have been working with DHS on, their interpretation of their policies because some of their concerns was that it was law enforcement sensitive. But as Representative Petrie already explained, as long as we have a state policy, we should be okay. But not having dealt with releasing federal information before, we were still working through exactly what. I have not seen this substitute, so as Representative Jaspers mentioned, if there's anything to really clarify what should be released on there, if it just says names only, that, kind of going back, that may be a good point to make sure it's clear what we can put out there, like Representative Frazier said as well, so.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think that if we want it to be strong and have some teeth and really be an informative portal, that the website, like Representative Frazier said, a lot of people in my community, myself and others, will search that sex offender registry to gather that information. So I think the more information that it has on there, the more user-friendly it is for the public to be able to gather that information. I think the more effective it's going to be. I support the measure.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Julius a question.
Sorry.
Julius, in light of the conversation has been about whether or not the current language allows us to get all the data we want that would be provided through Lens, because it does refer to names, because we changed it, because we wanted to make sure that we got only the people that we wanted to get. Is the language going to allow us to do that? Should we add a comment about names and all necessary data? I mean, is there something we should add to make this accomplish what we set out to do here?
Yes, I think as it is now, the bill is limiting it to names, so there may be an issue with that.
Well, we need to amend that.
What I would recommend is changing names to information on lines 14, 20, and 21.
14, 20, and 21. Change names to information.
Yes. So it'll be on line 14, the Bureau shall post on its public website the information of persons.
Of persons.
And then on.
Okay.
Then next is line 19, it'll say within 12 hours of receiving such information.
Such information. Okay.
And then on line 20, so it'll be, shall post such information. And then on line 21, it will be such information.
There's
And
also
then on
in,
line 15.
Hold on just a second.
Yeah, 15's got names as well. As such information is presented.
so make, on line 15, make information is.
Information is would be right
Yes.
rather than are.
While y'all are haggling that out, I got a couple of questions I want to ask Nellie. In the discussion, a couple of things I have an interest in. One, it says within 12 hours of receiving. Is this a doable proposition? Once y'all receive it, is 12 hours going to be enough for y'all to download and to transmit?
With the volume, yes, it will be.
All right. Second question that I have is the anybody from the Sheriff's Association here today? God knows we don't want to step afoul of Howard Sales or anybody. But did anybody knows the Sheriff's Association? Have they been notified and have they signed off on this? Did they testify yesterday?
We had, in subcommittee, we had Sheriff Warren from Cobb County. We had representatives from the Sheriff of Gwinnett County speak to the bill. I have spoken to Terry about it, and of course the language, the early language would have required something of the sheriffs. We took all that out. So my understanding, Chairman, is that in the current version, they absolutely support the bill
Very good.
as amended.
Very good. All right. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly to Representative Petrie, just follow along your passion. It was obvious there a moment ago. I don't know what they're worth of paper they're written on, but I wish we would do a separate urging resolution to the Trump administration to address just the issues that you brought out, that we would just addressing their failure of the prior administration, that let's do something about this. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And you know, in fairness, both previous administrations, Bush administration and the Obama administrations, have
Right.
failed, and I think that's changing, though.
I think, quite frankly, you could probably go back to the administration of about the last 35 years.
I think that's correct, Chairman. I think everyone has failed to deal with this very important issue.
All right. Let's see. Mr. Glatton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should we have language in, and I'm going back to what Nellie spoke about earlier about once they receive the information, they would see that information and then decide what is out there. Should we have something in the statute that says, as determined by the department, because if I understood you correctly, all the information that's coming down by way of lands from Fed is not all that information you're not putting out there. So at some point, someone has to make a decision as to specifically what information is going to be out there in line with what my colleagues are asking for, that we have enough information to distinguish between individuals. So should we have something in there that says as determined by the GBI? Maybe I'm not. No, I'm talking about the amount of it. Okay.
I know what you're saying.
I'm talking about the amount of information. So we're gonna have names, addresses, sex, color. There's a whole lot of information that comes down through the LENS process. We don't want all that information that comes down through the LENS process. So someone has to make a decision exactly what information we're gonna put out there so it's uniform. So, I mean.
I think that's pretty well already set, but Nellie, would you like to address that, or Julius?
Adequate information.
Hold on just a minute. Julius?
I think to deal with that one idea could be is to insert at the end just to say that the borough shall promulgate rules and regs for the implementation of this code section. And that would just give them the ability to do what they need to do. And they know by virtue of the testimony today that we're looking for more information than just a name.
All right.
Legislative intent would be clear.
Fairweather submitted.
How do we determine what boundary do we use, or what mechanism do we use for determining the information that goes on the sexual offender registration? Is there's a required amount of information or a model form I would imagine is used that this information for this particular registry is required on this particular individual?
There is, and I don't have my subject matter expert on that here today, so I wouldn't want to speak out of turn on that, but there is.
I agree. That model's already there. It would be a good model to go ahead and insert for that. I think it's important just to have photo and qualifying information that gives the general public or those that would be searching the information an adequate, amount of information that's worth the search itself. Thank you, Mr.
Definitely
Chairman.
adding the information will help us a lot, and adding that line that you suggested definitely will, but at least with the information, we're not limited to just names only, and that's something that we can definitely work with.
Good. Thank you.
All right. All right, Colonel Hitchens.
And I hate to keep bringing it up because I already said once it's onerous, but one of the most important things I believe in this is the address of the person. If you don't know where they live, if they've moved to Tennessee and you think they're still in your county or vice versa. But it's pretty onerous because on sex offenders, I believe it requires that they notify the sheriff's office within a certain number of days when they move. And the sheriff spend a lot of time trying to track them down to find out, because these aren't respected citizens that abide by the law in every case, and they have to run them down, and it's very costly. But and that's why I said previously. But I don't think I think it very much adds to the value if you have their address, just like you get on the website now and you check to see where the sex offenders live. That's important information.
Very good, Mr. Clark.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the amendments that we have.
Well,
that
let's
we've
see if we
offered.
have anybody else that wants to be. I had one other point I wanted to make, Nellie. This is, there's nothing about the date of implementation. How long will it take y'all to get your website changes and everything up? If it's effective on July the 1st, does that give y'all ample time?
It does, because Representative Petrie and I, we had already discussed the amount that we have, amount of data, the volume won't affect us.
So the normal July 1st
July
would
1st
be
will be
plenty of time.
appropriate.
All right. Any other questions from any of the committee members? All right, Julius, do you have any other advice to keep the state out of trouble with this legislation? Because I'm almost shocked that this committee is getting so rigid about law enforcement. I haven't heard anybody's word about the political correctness of this morning. Even though I think this might be an excellent bill for us to discuss driver's license and branding this morning.
No, don't mix them up, Chairman.
So your recommendation is wherever on lines 14, 15, 19, 20, 21, where the supplant the name of names to information.
Correct.
And did I hear
There's an is on line 15, Chairman. And there's an R that should be an is as well.
On line 15, we'll change names are to information is.
all right? And did we want to do anything about the department promulgating rules or not? That was discussed, so we have a clause in there that the department
That's
will
fine.
promulgate rules and.
You know legislative intent is to have the data.
So
Okay.
we'll insert at the end of line 21, the sentence saying, the borough shall promulgate rules and regulations for the implementation of this code section.
And as usual, this would be referred back, any of these rules and all would be referred back to the committees for approval or for our comments on it. Very good.
And the date.
implementation date?
Well, if I remember right, we don't have to put that in now
I
because
thought we did have to put.
I think that if you don't put a date in, then it automatically goes into effect on July the 1st.
That's my
If you want it
understanding.
to go in before, then you have to specify the date, all right? Any further questions from any of the committee members? All right, first order of business, somebody needs to make a motion. We have a motion. We have a second? We have a second. All right, who wants to make the motion that, to accept the amendments to the committee substitute? To do it. And I would recommend we do it as a new committee substitute. All right, we have a motion. Everybody understand the amendments? Any questions? Any problems with it? Anybody want to amend anything about driver's licenses on here? You make me feel awful good.
Hey,
if
hold on there,
somebody-
Chairman.
Chairman, no, we were on the roll today.
All right.
I got a minute. I want you to put a little Georgia peach right there in that little corner.
All right, if not, any further questions? All right, first, all in favor of the amendments as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have the amendments. Back to the original question before you. House Committee substitute, Public Safety substitute with, as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting now stands adjourned, and I thank you so much for your diligence today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Y'all wouldn't know you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Committee members, Mike. Hello. Hey, before y'all get away, Mike, Gloria, before y'all get away, I've got one other thing. Next Tuesday night, I think, is the committee dinner. Need to hear a response from y'all.